Well, I started to do competitions mostly. That was back in 2008, and I think, yeah, it started as a hobby, and over those competitions, eventually I got better, and then people actually hired me outside of the competitions to do motion graphics, and then at some point it was better than what I was studying, and so then I kind of made the jump and became like a professional basically. Videos are very hard. I feel like videos are very stressful, and I think a lot of people um, have don't really appreciate how much work goes into a lot of videos. And I had a bad-ish client experience like half a year into when I was only a motion designer. And then I thought, yeah, that's actually a pretty good time to just, take a break. Um, and maybe do some stuff you always wanted to do because I'd always kind of thought of myself as a coder who just hadn't really coded yet that much. And so I thought, bad-ish client experience, have some time on my hands, have some resources. So that's probably a good idea to pursue some other things. I've been experimenting with different styles, and I always like the technical aspect of the work, the coding, also the scripting in Maya and the stuff in Cinema 4D. And for me, it wasn't so much out of frustration, but more a way to try something new and, to kind of expand. It felt actually not unnatural. And as I said, it was kind of something I always had planned to do or wanted to do, at least in the back of my head. Not that I was consciously setting out to do it, but it was always there. And then I thought, now is really a good moment. Now I feel like I'm at a point in my life where it makes sense. And so then it kind of happened. It was basically, you start with a question, right? You don't know how programming even works or how to get started, and then, you Google your way to that. There's a lot of people who basically set out to do the same thing, who didn't know the first thing about coding, and then it's the internet. That's the one place where you can go and really learn about IT stuff on your own. And so that's, I feel like, a very helpful thing, and obviously a wonderful resource. And so it's actually fairly easy to just, go to a beginner tutorial, kind of look what they're suggesting. You go to some other tutorials and then kind of condense your own strategy for it. You download a few programs, you get set up, and then, yeah, you have a question. How do you draw a picture on the screen? And then you realize, okay, there's OpenGL, there's all these other solutions. Then you Google those solutions, think about the differences, or try to make an educated guess what's a good thing to go into, and then you take it from there. And then step by step, you kind of, you evolve your approach, and then it's just take it as it comes, like these small steps. And yeah, and that's how I think I learned to code. I mean, I've always coded in some regard, just a little bit, not those huge projects, but rather a lot of like ActionScript in Flash, some scripting in Maya or Cinema 4D, and well, a lot of websites as a kid especially. But it's I mean, coding a game is a much more evolved, involved endeavor, and so that it's on another scale, I felt like. But the nice thing is I went into this blissfully ignorant. I didn't know the first thing about it, and so I wasn't really sure what I was getting into, which might have been a good thing in retrospect. I don't know if I would have done it had I known how long it's going to take and, how financially ruinous it would be. Well, I mean, at the end of the day, if you think about it, After Effects is a coded application. So behind the scenes, this is all transferred into code, and they just, kind of made a GUI for what you would do behind the scenes anyway. And so you can basically strip away the GUI and just go at a much lower level and talk to the computer. And I guess that's at the end what you do. You define geometry, you kind of lay out points in space, and then you apply a texture to it, and then you move those textures around. And the thing is, from After Effects, you also learn a lot when you approach it like that, because you can also set up basically a virtual timeline without a GUI. But think about it as a timeline and keyframes and how you move from one keyframe to another. And then it's really just about manipulating numbers, basically, and how you get from one number to the next. And those numbers then represent different things: position, scale, translation, or just where the points are arranged in space. And so I think coming from After Effects, it's actually not that difficult conceptually to make that extra step and to code it, at least from an animation perspective. But then there is the technical side. How do you actually communicate that to the computer? Which I think is, it's a mindset maybe of thinking that you have to learn and kind of get comfortable with. But once you've done that, I think it's another way of thinking about these things, like another perspective, another camera on kind of the same problem, but a lot of the principles remain the same, and you just don't have an interface basically, or your interface looks a little different. It's more code rather than a GUI. No, I didn't show it to anyone, actually. So I lied to my family what I was doing because I didn't want to have any input. I didn't want to deal with it. I didn't want to. That was kind of also the whole point. Yeah, I thought that's a good opportunity to do what I want and not to do what a focus group wants or what my family wants or what my friends think is right, is right, or some client or whatever. No, this was the time when I was doing what I thought was right, which was not completely right, turns out. But you live and you learn. At the end of the day, it was also a decision because I knew I wasn't getting into like sculpturing or something. I knew that if I knew how to code at some point, it would be beneficial also for my career. I mean, I started being a motion designer with some sense of anxiety that is that really the smart thing to stop studying and kind of go off the deep end and try to be on your own as a motion designer. Maybe it's a good thing to kind of hedge your bets and to establish this other path that at some point you might go down. Regardless of how realistic I thought it was at the time, I thought, it's probably a good thing to at least try. And I set out to do this with, maybe 2 months, and then if it doesn't work, then I'll just stop. But it wasn't so much that it wasn't necessarily, I mean, I thought it was just, I never really overthought it. It was just a nice time and something I wanted to do, and I felt like I was in the lucky position to be able to do it and didn't feel constrained by resources or anything. And so I thought, yeah, let's go for it. Now I'm mostly coding. I'm working with Reuters, still on Reuters TV. 1 day a week. 4 days a week, I'm working with one of the guys who founded Vine, the app that got sold to Twitter, the video app. And so we're working on some new ideas, exploring some stuff. And that's very interesting. I'm also working with a startup from someone I know from Thomson Reuters in England. This is more involved with email. There it's more web programming for me. So it's mostly programming these days, but hopefully also with the kind of the goal to bring some motion graphic delight to an app. Well, in a way, I feel like, there is no master plan. There is a lot of just weird decisions that I make and that I possibly come to regret later on, just haven't yet. And so, see what sticks and take it from there. Weirdly enough, yeah, even though I always thought of myself as someone who likes every day to be the same and who would, never move out of his comfort zone, really. But now it turns out maybe I was wrong about myself, and that, yeah, there is also a certain comfort in not knowing what's going to be in 5 years. So, if you have like maybe, I don't know, not so the grandest expectations of what's going to happen in 5 years, you also know from the previous 5 years, okay, like things have turned out a lot differently than I thought. So no point in guessing what's about to come and worrying about it. Well, I think it's gotten a lot better. I mean, now the devices are actually capable enough and have enough battery that they can run animations at a decent frame rate, at interactive frame rates, and add some flourish to the stuff where before you were so much constrained by the hardware. There wasn't really that much room to do super involved animations. But having said that, I do think there's market differences between the companies. I do think that Microsoft and Microsoft interfaces have the best motion design. Yeah, I know that's apparently like a lot of maybe a lot of people disagree with me on that. It's somewhat of a personal opinion, as opinions are. Yeah, I think Windows, also Windows Phone 7 series, as it was called back then when it came out, that was also one of the catalytic things for me that I thought now someone really applied like motion and kind of involved transitions and animations to an interface, and I thought it looked really clean and modern and was very cool. And also, I think also you see it in Windows, how the Windows snap and how they expand, that there is someone behind this that really knows his stuff. And I'm not saying there isn't those people at Apple or Google, but I do think that there is less care there and less of a focus on motion. They have motion, but I don't think it's as accomplished. Well, that's very well possible. I don't know who they've hired, but I would assume, knowing from how I think a lot of companies approach this, they probably have a motion designer and a developer. And a lot of those things then get lost in translation. But I think if you have a product lead or that really cares about these things and that notices these subtle differences, then you can make those people talk together and figure out the right approach and really not give up before it's not right. So, I mean, it's really about taking the time and to hone this experience and really get it right, get the curves right, and get the motion designer, I think, satisfied. And if you pay attention to that, then I think you can be a traditional motion designer and a developer and work together just fine. There's Paper, which is very gesture-based, very from Facebook. A very, very interesting experience. I do think they went overboard on some of the animations. Me saying that is, I mean, I do go overboard on some animations, but I also feel like they also did. And there's, what's it called? Shop something, a storehouse or something? Store, I think it's Storehouse or something. It's also a very, very nice and fluid app that does a lot of interesting stuff. And then there's like things like Path, the social network, which has some really interesting small animations, but where you can really tell someone took notice and someone really cared about these details. And those are also obviously things that I take inspiration from.